dealing with Jacob for the past couple weeks. And so, as I step up to preach to the choir tonight, in Psalms 24, who shall ascend into the hill of the Lord? Who shall stand in his holy place? He that hath clean hands and a pure heart. He hath not lifted up his soul unto vanity, nor sworn deceitfully. He shall receive the blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. Does that sound familiar? Is that amazing? The blessing from the Lord. The greatest blessing that we could receive from the Lord is him bringing forth that righteousness from the God of our salvation. This is the generation of them that seek him, that seek thy face. Who? O Jacob. They seek thy face, O Jacob. As we've been dealing with as a man of tenacity that would not give up. He's even referenced here of the psalmist David as he's penning yet another incredible psalm of worship. And referencing of who's going to ascend the hill of the Lord, who shall stand in his holy place. Isn't it beautiful that the reference here is named as one by the name of Jacob? See, I think that's pretty incredible. When David, a worshiper, David who found the key of worship to the heart of God, he begins to declare, this is the generation of them that seek him. This is the generation of them that seek him, who seek your face. Arin, come up here tonight. Everybody give Arin a hand. I've asked her to. So, I asked her some things, what was it, 1 week, 2 weeks ago? Tonight. Yeah, okay, it was tonight. All right, yeah. Come on, step on up here. But just some reference to Jacob, and you just had some things in your heart that kind of...
Yeah, the thing that gets me about Jacob is I just can't get over his response to God was, I will not let you go except thou bless me. And the coolest part about that is that Jacob didn't start out that way. That we find him, he was the guy that, he deceived his father. Yes, his mom told him to, but he didn't stand up and argue with her about it and say, no, that's wrong. So, and we find
Who's going to stand up to mom?
Well.
But I like your heart. That's right.
And we find him later on that he's, when his mom tells him, run for your life, he's like, okay. And he runs for his life. Or, when Laban cheats him, he doesn't stand up for himself. When he goes to leave, by the orders of God, he actually runs away from Laban. And tries to trick Laban in order to get away because he was afraid of what Laban was going to do. But yet we see this guy who's willing, that God, like you said this morning, he was pulling out the Israel, the fighter in him that said, will you fight for my presence? And when you think about what he was asking for when he said, except thou bless me, he'd already had his father's blessing. Yeah. He already had the birthright. So what was he asking for? He knew there was more. And he was saying that, God, I already have this. And he wasn't asking for another herd of camel. He was saying, God, I want to be marked by you. I want, Cain bore the mark of the curse, but he was saying, God, I want to bear the mark of your presence. I want to bear the mark. So God touched his hip. So his outward body reflected that he had been marked by God. So for the rest of his life, people would look at him and say, whoa, he was marked by God. That's why, why he walks with a limp? Because God touched Jacob. I think that's so cool, because here's a guy that they didn't have Jesus. He wasn't saved. Here we have been made holy and righteous. How much more audacity can we have with God? How much more can we expect from God? How much more can we approach the Father when he's already told us to come boldly? Jacob didn't even have that. This had never been done. But here we have his example, and we can say, God, I will not be denied. When I cry out for you, I will see your face, because he already said it. And here Jacob is our example and saying, just like, God, I've got to have that. And I want more than that, because I have the Holy Spirit. So how much more? I want even more than that then. I'm not even stopping there.
I love what you said, his response. I mean, that's amazing. Whether he is response to a dream, you know, and he was building an altar as a response.
Every time God came, he took the time to honor God's presence. And because he honored God, God would honor him, and God kept coming, and God kept ambushing Jacob. Jacob wasn't seeking God in this moment. He was probably thinking, oh man, my brother's going to kill me, I'm going to die. But yet God's like, no, because this I'm going to totally just wreck everything you thought was going to happen and bring you into this encounter, and then act like it was your choice and act like you made the right decision.
I like that. That is good. So God, we just say here tonight, Lord, we just thank you for helping us in our response, Lord, to what we go through and things in life. Let our response be like that as of Jacob here tonight. Lord, let us be a people that honor your presence, regardless of what we're going through, regardless of what seems to be chasing us, regardless of what seems to be we're going through. Let our response be the very same. Let us, like the psalmist said out of Psalms 24 here tonight as we were reading, let us be those that will ascend the hill of the Lord, who shall stand in his holy place. God, we thank you for your cleansing and your purifying of our hands. We thank you for your washing of our heart, oh God. We thank you that we get to be a part of a generation that seek you, a generation that seek your face, oh God. We just thank you for that here tonight in Jesus' name. Come on, somebody. Everybody say amen. I think that is good. Way to go. That's good. That is really good. I think so. You got something else?
It's coming to that place with God that it is a place of reverence to talk that way with God, that people people used to think that, like, oh, I can't approach the Father like that. Like, that's not right. But this is actually the reverence of God, because God deserves to be wanted like that. He deserves to be sought with everything inside of us. It's getting to that place with God where his presence knocks you down to your knees, and all you can say is, God, I want more. I want more, because you're so focused on God and you're just so hungry for God. That's what he deserves. And that's the place where God wants to take us to, where it's a lifestyle of just being desperately wrecked for God, just all the time. That's what, I mean, you can't read what Jacob said in a passive voice. I mean, try and read that verse in a monotone. You just can't, because you can hear when he says, you know, I won't let you go except you bless me. I mean, you can't, he couldn't live any other way after that.
Now, are you don't take away from my notes now. Don't spoil this here. Right?
Sorry.
Well, this is true, because somewhere along the line, we find out that in Psalms 24, that the gates somehow became silent. And I don't know what caused it, and it really doesn't matter, but sometimes in life there's a silencing of gates that happens. And the question that the psalm that David is asking is of the clean hands. Who's going to do it? I'm glad he didn't put some preference of who could do it, but it's actually an open-ended question, isn't it? Who is going to ascend the hill of the Lord? Who is going to descend the hill of the Lord? I think this is that response that we're waiting for. David is openly asking, because David danced ahead of his time. He shouldn't have been able to go into the presence of God and the relationship like he had, but he was naive enough to not even know any better. He was naive enough to have a passion for God that superseded his time. And if he could do it back then, what's available for us now, like you were saying?
That's right.
With the Spirit of God within inside of us, flowing through us and around us. If David could enter into that back in the Old Testament, we have an open door, an open-ended, not just a question, but how about an invitation? Who's going to ascend the hill of the Lord? I can remember when we were in Buenos Aires, Argentina, talking with Claudio Frazier. We were talking about ascending the hill of the Lord. I still remember the conversation. And it was actually dealing with ascending the hill of the Lord. Who's going to do it? And there's a reason why there is actually a question. Because you would think even in Spirit-filled churches that would be everybody, but it's not everybody. Not everybody's ascending the hill. Not everybody's going forth. And for what reason? There's more than one reason. I think a lot of the times it even comes up who has clean hands. And sometimes we may look at our hands and we may begin to think that my hands are not clean enough. We may look at our heart and you think or have this feeling that my heart has got some issues there. I don't know if I'm pure enough. I don't know somehow in the struggle of ascending the hill, because there is a climb. There is a climbing involved in ascending the hill. It means that you're not going to be able to stay where you are. I said it means you're not going to be able to stay where you are. There's going to be something where you're going to have to dig in and climb. It's going to take some tenacity. It's going to take some strength. There's going to be times when you feel wore out. But you know in your heart of hearts that there is a due season at the top of this hill. And I'm not going to stop climbing. I'm not going to stop pursuing. And I'm going to ascend the hill of the Lord. Yeah, but you just blew it. You just sinned and you knew better. I'm still climbing the hill of the Lord. I'm still going to ascend into a holy place. Yeah, but you don't deserve it. I know it. And I'm still ascending this hill. And I love that. Back in those days, there was actually a washing required by the priest in the service of the tabernacle of the temple. It was the brazen laver that was there. And that was the purpose. It was for them to clean their hands as they were going forth to do sacrifices in the presence of God. They literally had to have clean hands as opposed to it. So when David's writing this, it's so will you go about your altar, O Lord. They knew what it was like to engage in prayer with clean hands. And that's what some of the people obviously believe in Paul's referencing in Timothy when he speaks about holy hands. Holy hands. And one of the things, of the many things you said that were so powerful, was the fact of God deserves a generation, a people that will pursue him in that way. To unabandonedly come boldly before his throne, right? To come boldly. He gave us that invitation. He says, I don't want you even coming in here sheepishly and saying you're a lowest worm, no dirty dog, don't deserve it. He says, no, you come into my presence and I want you to come into my presence with boldness. We're talking about a boldness of entering into the presence of God. Some people say that that's pride, or some people say it's hype. But it's not hype. It's someone that has a boldness on the inside of them saying that regardless of what I deserve, I'm coming into his presence. Because it even says in that verse in Hebrews, it says to obtain what? Mercy and grace. When? In time of need. Anybody got a need? You need some mercy and grace? That means your hands aren't that holy because you're crying out for some mercy. That means your heart has some issues. But he says, come with me. Don't wait till you think you have things figured out and your issues are all lined up. Don't wait till you think you're holy enough. I want you to come into my presence even if you've got dirty hands. I want you to come into my presence because the result of you coming into my presence is there's a purifying of a heart. There's a cleansing of a mind. There is a place that you come into his presence that we go for. In the Old Testament, they would drop dead in his presence. Up into the Old Testament, even in his time, if you saw his face, you were a dead man. You could not see his face and live. Yet Jacob even declared, it was Elohim. It was actually in the Hebrew, it's breaking down that we were reading from in Genesis 32. It was Elohim. I prevailed with God. I survived. I saw him and I lived. Ask Isaiah what he had to go through to enter into the presence of God. Because in Isaiah chapter 6, he stood and caught up into a moment that he wasn't prepared for. He was caught up into the presence of God, into the very place where the throne was. He began to describe the movement of angels in this place where he was at. And his first response, the prophet of the Lord, who is going to be the most prophecies of the Messianic prophecies, of the Messianic prophecies that was going to come forth from his mouth. And his first response is, I am a man of unclean lips. Isn't it amazing how he touches the unclean places of our life, the places that we try to hide, the places we don't want to be out before God, even though he sees it anyways. Even though he knows we like to hide it, we like to shine it up and put a mask around it, put some fig leaves around it, but God sees and God knows, and it's at those places that we unveil it, the places that we repent of it. It's not the places of guilt or of shame, but it's of the place where he comes and he brands and sears from the coals of the altar at the unclean place. And it's in that searing comes a purifying. Because as though we want to give him our strengths, he's not looking for our strengths. He's looking for us to be able to give him our weakness. Will you surrender to me your weakness? Because it's your weakness that I'm going to use. Although, Isaiah, you may have unclean lips, I'm going to use those lips to prophesy of my son. I'm going to use those lips to bring forth my word, that when Jesus stands up to preach his first sermon in the New Testament, he stands up and he preaches from a man with unclean lips. Come on, Gateway. Do you hear what I'm saying? So when we ask the question, who will ascend the hill? Who has holy hands? Who has a pure heart? None of us are holy enough. None of our hands are good enough. But it doesn't matter. Like in Isaiah, you find yourself in a place of crying out, mercy, O God, for I have unclean places. But as we come with our response with a boldness, because that's what he deserves. That's what he deserves. That's what he deserves.
It reminds me of what Mike Bickle says, that God sees our sincerity long before we're actually mature enough to walk out the things that we've been praying, and the things that we would speak out. That's why you have people like David in the Bible who did all kinds of stuff wrong. He wasn't perfect at all, but yet God judges him and says he's a man after my heart. So it's like you can't let but God, I can't ask to see your face because I don't meet this qualification. I did this and I've done this, and like we can't let that stop us. Because when you speak it out, when you just come after God anyway, he starts to fix those things in your life just when you're in his presence and you don't even realize. And that he's making you clean in your pursuit of him.
Come on. The blessings of righteousness says that he blessed me, and in the blessing, my righteousness you bring forth. And that's incredible. To walk in places we don't deserve, to go in places ahead of our time. Who's ready to go ahead of our time right now and the time that we live? And it says that we know in Psalms 24, in our first closing tonight, because after it references Jacob of seeking his face, after he's given the invitation or the question, who's going to do it, then he kind of gives us the key on how to do it. Because he goes on in verse 7, he says, lift up your heads, O ye gates, and be ye lifted up, you everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. I don't know if your gates have been silenced recently, but it's time for an eruption. It's time for the breaking of the silence of the gates. And just as the worship team thought they would get a break, we're going to have some eruption of gates that breaks the silence, regardless of mistakes or inadequacies, regardless of weaknesses. He says, lift up your heads, O ye gates, and be lifted up, you everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O ye gates, even lift them up, ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Who is the King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory. And we can see that obviously we get these incredible instructions, even from Psalms 100. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving and into his courts with praise. Be thankful is that beautiful place of entering in beyond the gates, a place of thanksgiving. In spite of your emotions not feeling thankful, or if you can't see something to be thankful for, then I'm just thankful for you, God. If my circumstances are hard for me to be seeing something to be thankful for, if I've bought into a lie that I don't see something to be thankful for, I start at the place of saying, who is the King of glory? I thank you that you are strong. I thank you that you are mighty in battle. I thank you that I don't have to think this battle is just me on my own, but I can begin to realize in the midst of thanksgiving and praise that the battle belongs to the Lord. In the midst of thanksgiving and praise, I found out I enter into a place of his presence where my hands are cleansed, that my heart is purified, and I come into a place of his presence. And before I know it, I'm ascending the hill of the Lord. And I've got cleaner hands. I got clean hands. Holy hands. I've got a heart of purity. He says, lift up your heads. Look up. Because the glory and lifter of your head is right here. And as you lift up and you look up, you're going to begin to see. And the silence of the gates begin to erupt with praise. And we see a generation of people, oh Jacob, a generation of people that are radically falling in love, going in beyond the veil, pressing through beyond their time, and capturing, holding on to the heel of God to see his face. Holding on to the place of saying, God, it's your righteousness, it's your face that we seek. God, it's your blessings greater than mansions or cars. It's your blessings that we seek. God, we thank you for your face shining upon us. Tonight, we'll just have the ushers bring the buckets up here to the altar. Lord, we just thank you as we give tonight into this place of promises fulfilled, of place of coming into your presence. Lord, our response to what we're asking for is leading us into the place of ascension, of the ascended place. God, I thank you for your blessings upon the seat tonight. I thank you, God, for your blessings upon the tithes and the offerings. In Jesus' mighty name. As you come to give, welcome you. Just step out of your seat and you can give up here tonight. And then after the giving is done, we're just gonna a couple instructions I want to give you for the week. Number one, I don't know why, but Pastor Dave's daughter's here tonight. Nobody touch her? Nobody, smile from afar. So those are instructions number one. Instructions number two. We're going into places of praise and worship this week. I don't care if you have to pull over your car on the shoulder, if you have to get off on an exit. I don't care how ridiculous you look as people that are driving by. But we're coming into places where the gates are not going to be silent. Coming into the places that we answer. And I ask you tonight, who's going to ascend the hill of the Lord? I'm going to ask you tonight, who is going to ascend the hill of the Lord? It's not everybody, but it is your invitation. It's not everybody that's doing it, but you can. Go to the place that I love. Because speaking of promises, God promised that Moses, he'd go into the promised land, right? Well, the problem was Moses had already tasted and seen of the goodness of God, who said, God, I appreciate your promise of the promised land, but I don't want no promise if you're not with me. Thank you for the angel, but besides angels, besides the encounters of angels, God, it's you that I want, and if I can't get you, I don't want no promise, and I don't care about a promised land. I'll stay in the wilderness where you are, as opposed to entering in with an angel. And so even though we're excited of his promises, I think there's some crazy-hearted folk here tonight that says, beyond the promise, God, we're here, God, to seek your face. And I'm going to ask you one more time, who's going to ascend the hill of the Lord this week, tonight? Then stand to your feet. Come on. Lift up your heads, O ye gates. Lift up your heads, ye everlasting doors. And the King of glory shall come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord mighty in battle. The Lord mighty in battle. He is the King of glory. And God, we stand at this moment answering a question that was offered thousands of years ago on the side of a hill. We answer right here on the side of a hill at 97 Oak Lawn in Glen Carbon, Illinois. And we say, God,